A loaf of bread costs 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. Ground beef is up almost 50%.
Wow. That seems like quite a campaign strategy. Who's been in charge all this time? Joining me now, my friend Tiana Lowe Doescher, columnist for the Washington Examiner. Tiana, who's she campaigning against there? What's this woman been doing for the last 3.5 years?
Meanwhile, OJ is looking for the real killer, Jesse. No, it's clear if you go through the data on those price increases across the board, but especially in groceries, it all happened under Biden and Harris. Under Trump, inflation averaged less than 2% each year, and 2% is that Federal Reserve target. Under Biden and Harris, it has averaged nearly 6%, so 3 times what the Fed wants. And yet she thinks that she is the solution to the inflation she created in the form of price controls, which I get that we on the right sometimes throw around terms like communist or socialist frivolously, but in this case, that's exactly what her economic plan is.
Can you explain to people why, I know we're stepping out of the Kamala world here for a moment, why is there a target for 2% inflation by the Fed at all? It's hard for people to understand. Wait a minute, so your target is to make sure the value of my dollar goes down a little bit every year? It's hard for people to get. Can you explain that to me?
When it's a fixed 2% amount, it means that employers are expected to account for that in cost of living adjustment. It means Social Security payments are supposed to be predictable, things like that. And what you don't want is you don't want to have massive variability in terms of deflation and inflation, because if prices start going down, then you could wind up in a depressive spiral where people are not wanting to sell their goods, right? Or where people are holding on to their goods, and it slows economic growth. So the idea is that with 2% is that it's supposed to be very predictable. You are having room for keeping unemployment lower than you could do, because if you had that 0% inflation target, then what you would have is higher unemployment. And what we saw in 2019, it was the Goldilocks economy, at least when it came to these metrics, right? As you and I both know, debt and government spending still way too high, but the macroeconomic factors like unemployment, inflation, you had this perfect happy medium. And then COVID came and they had the excuse to inflate away the currency.
How did they cause so much inflation? Why are eggs so expensive now, Tiana? Why is power so expensive? My power bill is jaw-dropping now. How did these things happen because of COVID?
Broadly speaking, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. It's too many dollars chasing too few goods. And there are ways in the Biden administration made it worse, right? So for one thing, you had Kamala Harris being the swing vote on the $1.9 trillion American Rescue Plan, and then the $1.3 trillion Inflation Reduction Act, which reduced inflation the same way that the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is a democratic republic. It's not. There's a study that just came out the other day from a University of Chicago professor, Casey Mulligan, that found that the majority of the excess inflation that happened under Biden and Harris is because of those 2 swing votes that Kamala Harris herself made. So on top of all this government spending, and the government does have to fund it some way, and that's in devaluing our own paychecks. Average Americans take in a 5% hit to their paycheck. Then they've also overly regulated the energy industry. You've also given handouts to that 55 to 65 age demographic where they aren't working anymore. They all retired early. And it's you and I and those of us with young kids or those of us that want to start families who are paying for everyone else. So we don't have enough workers. We don't have enough energy. Energy is a leading indicator for prices across the board. And then on top of it, it's an intentional design. You inflate the currency to fund government debt. It's called seigniorage, and it's been going on in human history for thousands of years.
Tiana, why do they want the border open? This is obviously something that's been done purposefully. I should note that's also inflationary to bring in 20 million people you have to pay for in 4 years. But why are they so adamant about bringing in a bunch of murderers and rapists? It doesn't make sense.
So legal immigration, when done correctly, can be disinflationary. Illegal immigration, as you point out, is the exact opposite. Not only is it jacking up prices in the housing market, but also a lot of these democratic localities, they have laws that prevent new housing from being built. You have them draining these social safety nets. Here in Chicago, the city spends some $7,000 per month per migrant just to house them in what used to be a high school. And so a part of it, I think, is Joe Biden being naive in believing his base and believing that, oh, the child separation is inhumane, making it so that way we can't let asylum seekers in the country is inhumane. And what's the result? The majority of migrants coming into the country are no longer from either Mexico or the Northern Triangle countries. They're coming from Iran. They're coming from China. They're coming from Russia. They're coming from countries, and they're exporting military-aged men who are indeed coming in. And the correct word at this point, when it's 10 million illegal immigrants strong, is probably invasion. I think it's a combination of true believers and those that were stupid enough to get duped by then. Because a massive issue that we have is DHS Inspector General just announced that we have more than 250,000 missing children. And a lot of these children were trafficked on the way through the Darien Gap and back into the U.S., and we've lost them.
I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.